So, I have your questions. Thank you very much. I always find questions very stimulating for reflection. There's a lot of questions about reflection, a number of them. And yes, one of them was, you mentioned in your talk about noticing a point in your meditation that it's not working. Please could you expand on what to do at that moment? So that's that. I think I did say this morning, but I'll say more or less the same again and see if it leads anywhere else. If you have that sense of, oh, this isn't working, it must be because we've got some other sense of how it ought to be, and it isn't like that. So sometimes that's occurring because we've got a kind of little agenda, thinking, like, oh, meditation, that means I'll be feeling very calm and very open, and this will be very interesting, and I'm not feeling anything like that, so this isn't working. Or it might be because we're thinking, well, I'm supposed to be keeping my attention on the present moment and I'm not, so it's not working. Or I'm supposed to be feeling better in myself and I'm not, so it isn't working. So there's always some kind of ability we have to reflect and consider, what it is. So there's some sense of our immediate experience and some sense of vision of what it could be. So, that's the sign of our intelligence, really. And if it's fundamentally dull, low, kind of heavy, distracted, very not really focused at all, I think we're probably right. It's something's not quite working. But on the other hand, maybe our idea of what working would be is not quite right either. So that's when reflection is really important. Because when you're feeling dull, that's actually a feeling, and it's arising in your awareness. And if you're feeling very sleepy, and you're aware of the dullness, you're aware of the drifting, you're aware that your mind is going off into getting caught in things and then suddenly coming back, and then you get caught in the next thing and it's coming back and your head's dropping, and actually that could be quite good meditation if you're kind of up for it. If you're really kind of, there's something very simple about it. You're right there in the moment, and it's like, I remember seeing Kala Rinpoche once, sitting in the puja, with all the monks sitting round, and it was early in the morning, and I'm sure he was meditating on dropping off to sleep, because he was going very relaxed, and then you could see him dropping, and then he's any moment now, and then he'd go, and as he came out of it, it was like this very awake look on his face, and then off you go again. I was really impressed, actually, because it was like he was really exploring that whole experience of what was happening, and then there was so much life in his eyes as he came back up, as if, and so smooth as well, like it wasn't, You know, like, it was almost like, oh, there we go, up. And Mixi Shikpa describes that sometimes as this kind of like going down and then it coming up by itself. And so it doesn't actually in itself have to be that it's dullness, therefore it's not working. But obviously, if you have completely drifted off, or when you come round, you sort of think, oh dear, I've done it all wrong, you know, I shouldn't have done that. There's obviously been a break because you've left the experience and stood back and judged it and sort of thought, well, you know, that shouldn't be it. Which, you know, might be a wise move, kind of, to, you could decide that, okay, I can't really maintain any kind of awareness in this state, so I think I'll, you know, look around me and generally, you know, wake myself up. And you know when you're more awake. So, in a sense, that's working. Because you know that. You can tell the difference between being awake and not. And then sometimes right on the edge, which is quite an interesting place to be. So that really, that sense of I'm exploring, or you're exploring your experience, you're awake to your experience in the moment, would show it was working, even though you would have thought by now you wouldn't have so many wandering thoughts, or you wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't have so much emotion coming up, and so you think, well, it's not working because I've still got emotion coming up, or it's not working because I'm still feeling very tense. Actually, it's not necessarily that it's not working. I mean, maybe that's just how it is. You know, that whatever it is that causes tension or causes tension to release hasn't happened. But that doesn't mean that there isn't any meditation happening. There isn't any what would you say? I suppose you'd have to say there isn't any insight happening, or any possibility of insight. By means of which, by that I mean, I suppose I mean letting go of views, really. That you're seeing through your view that it should be different, that you're holding there above yourself, you know, it should be different. And then you let that go, and this is actually how it is. And being awake with it, being present with it, connecting it with the heart, opening from that place, is still possible. Still possible. And you can tell if it's working in the sense, if there's any sense of life in it. It's I find that really interesting thing to say, really, or to notice. That when we say life, we kind of know what that means, even though obviously nobody yet has discovered what life is. It's a big question, isn't it? What is life? But we know, don't we, that aliveness, it's kind of got intelligence to it, hasn't it? It's got intelligence and there's nothing in it that you could grasp. As soon as you can grasp something, that's not life. Perhaps there's life in the grasping itself. You know, there has to be an alive quality to grasp onto an idea. This is not working. That's very alive, actually, isn't it? This isn't working. You can feel the life in that. That's, you know, something like, it's just, I'm just stuck and it's always going to be like this. There's no life in it, is there? It's kind of, but it's not working. Looking for something, there's something alive there. So there's something more almost like you could look at that in itself. If you felt very stuck, then behind that stuck feeling, there's a feeling it doesn't have to be like this. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. There's a kind of a part of ourselves that's aware it could be different. Even if we're trying to tell ourselves, well, you just have to put up with it. It's still another part of ourselves which knows it could be different. And that's not just because you're comparing yourself with other people. It's because you can feel it in yourself somehow. It could be different. And there's a sadness about that, isn't there? It's not different, and I'm really sad. There's a real sadness about it's not different. Even though I've sat here for years trying to meditate and doing everything properly, it's still not working, it's not different. There's a lot of life in that. There's a lot of truth in that. All those years of practice, and it's not different. You know, like, oh, there's something about that, and is it supposed to be different? And if it were different, how would it be? And how could this that I'm experiencing be it? In a way, all of that is alive and it is reflection. How could it be? How could it be it? But what stops it being reflection is if there's a reaction, where there's a kind of, rather than staying with that, could it be? Could it be? No, I don't know. Could it be? When you're in the state of, I don't know, I'm not sure, that's very alive. As soon as you become sure, well, it's always like this, it's always going to be like this, it's, it's no point, I can't do it, it's another thing I fail at. You've killed it by kind of suddenly you've decided, that's how it is, and you've killed it. But the moment before that, there was this little possibility of something. And I think when I'm reflecting, that's that edge of possibility that keeps the whole thing awake and keeps it alive and gives me a feeling of direction, gives me a feeling of it's working. Not that it's working in some preconceived way, but there's something very true and congruent about it, and I get a clearer sense of what it is that I'm doing that's getting in the way. Like I'm having these notions, I'm having these ideas, and that there's an option, I don't have to have these ideas. So then that gives me an opening of some kind. I can open out more to how it would be without those ideas, and I don't know. And that is a very open way of being, to not know. I don't know. I really don't know. Well, there's again my old idea. I don't know any other. There's the old idea. Don't know any other. And before you know where you are, you're actually in a different space. Just from not knowing.